I used to be an accountant. Actually, I'm still an accountant.
Oh.
It doesn't look like it.
Really?
Yeah, absolutely.
Wow.
So I spent 10 years wearing a suit and having a shirt and,
10 years.
and a tie. I was really bad at being an accountant. And I worked in London, and I worked in Australia, and then I went back and I worked in London. And a good friend of mine was doing a startup in 2000 during the original .com revolution, and I joined his startup.
How old was you at that?
How old was I?
Yeah.
That's really personal. Is that in international time or Korean?
Yes,
I discovered there's a difference between Korean age and international
I'm
age.
just curious, so.
Korean age, that's complicated. I was
Around
about
30s?
10 years into my career, so that would have been early 30s.
Oh, okay, very good. Yeah, thank you.
I'm now in my early 40s,
Okay, thank you.
and that's international, not Korean either.
Okay. Yeah, so you
So, I started working with startups in 2000, and over the following 10 years, I've either worked in startups as a finance director, or I've worked helping startups raise money, something called corporate finance. And then about 4 or 5 years ago, I was a venture capitalist for a very short space of time, about 3.5 minutes. No, actually about a year. And one of the things I discovered was I was writing checks. I was very fortunate. I could write checks of about $250,000 to lots of early stage startups. And it felt like a lottery ticket. Anybody had a $250,000 lottery ticket? Well, I had about 6 of them. And there was no way any of them were going to come in. So I went to my investors and said to them, rather than write one big check, I can't do this with 2 hands. I'll write 10 small checks. So instead of one for $250,000, I'll write 10 $25,000 checks. And I'll work with them for 3 or 4 months and work out which of the teams, actually I could really help them move forward, but then I'd be in a better place to establish which of them should have a bigger check. And that's essentially when I went, oh, that's called an accelerator. And somebody had already invented it. So Techstars had invented it in Boulder, Colorado, and Paul Graham had invented a version of it in Y Combinator in Silicon Valley. So I'm a strange person because I'm not very good at anything, but I'm very good at lots of different things. So having been in a startup and having raised money for startups and also having invested money in startups, I kind of had this strange view of being able to look at startups and how they raise money from all the different sides, and understood how VCs thought and understood how startups thought and how you raise money on behalf of those two parties. So that shortcutted about 20 years of my life.
So you send email to like program and about you share your ideas about your accelerating program.
Yeah. So I emailed David Cohen at Techstars, and I emailed Paul Graham at Y Combinator, and Paul wrote back to me and said, everything you need to know about Y Combinator is on the website. Goodbye.
That's it.
Paul.
What about the
he answered the email.
Yeah.
For all of his for all of the things that he's done. David Cohen agreed to meet me for about 30 minutes.
Really?
One day. Well, no, actually, he agreed to do 30 minutes on a Skype call. And somehow I decided to get on a plane, and instead of doing a Skype call,
Oh, really?
I went to Boulder, Colorado to meet him. Parker Stalker style. And 10 minutes into the meeting,
10 minutes?
Yeah, 10 minutes into this half an hour meeting, he looked at me and he said, I like you. How can I help? And I went back to Boulder about...
What back means going back to UK and back to Boulder?
Yeah. He was in the middle of his program. and essentially I went to Boulder, met with him for 30 minutes, and then he said, "That's kind of cool, can I help?" So I went back 6 weeks later and spent 3 days with him and just talked about all of the different things which were going on in the program and what would work and which bits wouldn't, which bits would break and which bits would make the startups cry and which bits wouldn't. And then he got on a plane and went to England to help me start the program. And over $1 million.
Very good. Yeah.
So I had, similar to here, had already raised some money from government to help me start the first program. And it was really good because I knew more than the government guys knew, which wasn't very difficult. Don't tell them that.
Maybe that is similar what's happening right now in here. That
And
you did it about 4 years ago.
About the same thing. It's not dissimilar. This is very, very similar to how I would have felt in the UK 3 or 4 years ago. And it was clearly that there's something happening and people were really interested and government felt that there was something that they should do. And this is you're not alone. There are many places around the world which are going through exactly the same thing, where there's a really genuine interest in something going on and the fact that maybe there's a different way of actually working being fun. Not necessarily working for other people, but working for yourself and getting other people to work for you as well.
Yeah. Okay. So long, good answers. And next one is the you have run a lot of accelerating programs. So what worked and what didn't work?
What works?
Like there's maybe a 6 weeks program or a 12 weeks program or 3 months?
They're always 3 months, 13 weeks. So one of the things that happened was because David was so helpful for me when I initially set up what was called the Difference Engine, which then became Springboard, which then became Techstars, but we'll get to that in a minute. Because David was so helpful for me, I decided that actually it was important that if David helped me, that I should help others. And so when I set my program up, there was a lot of people came to me and said, "Oh, I want to do one of these programs. Can you explain to me how this works?" So I've actually, in the last 3-4 years, helped to set up another 13 other programs.
Wow. In UK or in other countries?
From Montreal to Moscow. Mad. And of those programs, I've got...
Under the different name or the same name?
Oh, completely different. Because I think one of the things which is important is people have their own personal ownership of each accelerator. Because accelerators, what's interesting is it's a little bit about money, but a lot about support. And it's a lot about lots of people in the ecosystem supporting everybody in that process. Pardon me. And because it's a very local, focused group of individuals, it's important to me that the people on the ground who are actually running those programs feel some sense of ownership. And so therefore the idea of, much as I hate describing it like this, but like me coming along and saying, I think you should have my brand. It's actually, you should have your own brand.
Yep.
Yeah. And so therefore it's important that individuals locally actually get the benefit from those things. So when I say I've helped 13 programs set up, I have fiscal interests. I've got financial stakes in some of those. I think now 3 or 4 of them, but it was never the primary motivation behind it.
Yeah.
The motivation was that somebody had helped me, so why shouldn't I help other people? So you asked the question, which was what works and what doesn't work. A lot of things are really transportable. So the thing that's common across all of them is they're very, very similar, which is it's a little bit of money and lots of support. The thing which stands out as really valuable is the fact that actually money isn't the thing which holds people back. It's actually expertise and knowledge and contacts. And what will happen is, if you imagine go back 10 years,
Yeah.
10, 11, 13 years when I was at .com.
Yeah.
We raised $25 million. Spent it in a year. That was a lot.
When you
of
were
fun.
in startup, right?
Yeah.
It's big money.
That we had a lot of parties. It didn't
Really?
we didn't spend all 25 million on parties, but
How many employees it in?
we went from 0 to about 70 people
Wow,
in about 6 months.
very.
And then I
That's
fired
great.
half of them because I was the financial director. And we discovered that the business was never going to work. So we fired half of them.
Wow.
And then I ended up firing the rest of them 6 months later because it was completely useless. It was never going to work. But what was interesting is to do a startup 15 years ago, you needed a large sum of money. Cash was actually the barrier to entry. What's different today is the cost of actually doing a startup is actually now essentially the cost of keeping yourself alive at those early stages. And we use lots of different words, and you'll hear people talking about lean and product market fit, but it's essentially you can tinker a lot at a really early stage on essentially very, very little money to actually discover what you need to do to make that business fit. And actually, Simon Lee from Fleeto will talk a lot about that. He actually spent a long time before he even raised money trying to work out what he felt was going to be the thing which made that business tick. Going forward, the cost is going to continue to fall if that's practically possible. So therefore, the importance of the knowledge, the know-how, the expertise, and the contacts is becoming more and more important at that really early stage. And so therefore, even in places where there's very little capital, if you've got smart people who want to help support each other, these accelerators are extremely valuable to try and bring the community together.
Okay, that makes sense. And next one is, what's the story that you get involved in Techstar? Yeah,
Sorry.
yeah. Well, how did you get involved, join the Techstar as a managing partner? So you just shut down the Springboard and work in a.
So just before Christmas, David Cohen, who runs Techstars, who'd helped me 3.5 years ago, came and tapped me on the shoulder and said, "We're going to come to London. Would you like to run it?" I thought I could run it or I could compete with it. Which option do you think you would pick?
Run.
Run. Yeah, that's what I thought. What my wife then pointed out to me was I had had the longest job interview in history.
Wow.
So 3.5 years earlier, he had helped me set up my first program and then went, "Go away and see if you can actually do that." And then he came back 3.5 years later and said, "Would you like to run my program?" About bloody time too.
So it takes 3 years.
He doesn't make decisions quickly, but he does make really good decisions.
Yeah. So let's move on to the real some questions about the startups. How do you find a good startups and can you define a good startup based on your philosophy? What is a good startup and how do you find that one to invest?
I don't think investment's that necessary. Sorry, no, that's the wrong way of describing it. A good startup should have the ability to raise money, if it needs to raise money.
Yep.
But equally, it should be able to, from day zero, go out and just build a business and sell things. It's like, there's lots of businesses in South Korea and Seoul today that just make money.
Yeah.
Why shouldn't a startup? What defines a good startup?
Yeah.
I think having a really smart team of people is really important. I don't believe in, even though Simon's just walked in, single founder businesses. I wouldn't have actually had Simon on the program if he hadn't had other people that were working for him at the time.
Yeah.
Because you're starting a business and you've got crazy voices in your head, doesn't necessarily it's going to turn into success. It's important to show me or show others that you can persuade people to join you.
Yeah.
Because at some point between being the first employee or the first founder and being Samsung, you've got to employ a few people along the way. So having a skill set to persuade others to come and join you is really, really important, particularly when you've got no money. Like, your ability to persuade somebody to do something for you when they're doing it for free
when there's nothing.
is really, really valuable asset. If you talk about investment, which is different from
a bit different
from doing your own business and starting out with customers, is investors tend to look for things which are very, 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 very big markets more often than not.
Okay.
Market size, market opportunity is really important. However, if you're running your own business, if you're running your own business and you're bootstrapping, that's less important. Being able to satisfy a need is much, much more important. Man, come on. Sure. Actually satisfying a demand is really important. Or fixing a problem is really important. If you're not fixing somebody's problem, you're probably not going to sell a lot of products or have a lot of users.
Okay, thanks. It's helpful. And the other thing is, what would be the top 3 reasons that entrepreneurs fail?
I could only come up with one.
Yeah, what's that?
They don't satisfy a customer need. So let me come at it a slightly different way. There are many people who come and pitch me many different ideas, and normally the first thing I ask is, so how many customers have you asked? And they go, haven't. And then I say, go away and ask 10 people and work out, actually, do they want your product? And actually, they call it customer facing development. But essentially, I think it's much underestimated. The need to, entrepreneurs are really shy and introverted and don't like talking to other people. And even more so in South Korea. Very quiet, don't say anything. But it's really important to try and get out there and to try and get some customers. Even if they're, much as much people say this, much as people talk about giving stuff away for free, what's really important is people want to use your product. Is much more important. If they then want to pay for your product, then there's something even more interesting, crazy about your idea.
What you say is a very basic one for the entrepreneurs.
But that's why businesses fail. They essentially don't have any customers, unless they're Twitter. But even Twitter satisfied a need, even though nobody understood it at the time. But if you don't have people who want to use your product, you ain't going to get very far.
Okay, very basic but very important part. Yeah, to understand.
People don't ask customers. Seriously, they sit
why,
there and
why
say,
do you think
I can sit here and code a little bit longer,
Not asking.
or speak to a customer. Oh, I think I'll code.
Yeah.
It happens all the time. It happens even on my
even in like Korea and in England.
Even in Techstars, it's like you ask the question of like, have you spoken to anybody? No.
Really?
The guys are really smart, but it's like they might not like my product. They might say, don't want it. And then you say, well, what do you want? Because actually the thing that's interesting is that until you get your users to use your product, they're the ones that are going to pay you for it. It's not what you're going to dictate. You're not Steve Jobs. What is it?
Even like a one-to-one?
100 different mentors, and then your ears bleed, and your head explodes, and you don't understand a word that they're saying, and you go, oh my God, I thought I had a business. And but it's like, instead of having a customer, you go and speak to as many smart people as you can, and you ask them, like, what's going to go wrong with my business? Don't tell me what's great about my business. Tell me everything that's wrong. And then what you do, shut up. Is then you ask them, once you get bored of listening to them telling you everything that's rubbish about your business, you ask them, like, how do I fix all these problems in my business? Yeah. And one of the things I say to people is, you don't have to be on an accelerator to do that. So the clever part I always describe is the way to hack being in an accelerator is speak to 3 really smart people. Find 3 really smart people and ask them those questions. But before you leave the meeting, you ask each of them to introduce you to at least 1 person, possibly 2, and in the best case scenario, 3. Yeah. So if you ask 3 people, and those 3 people introduce you to another 3 people each, and those 3 people introduce you to 3 more people, you end up speaking to about 40 people in 3 different intervals.
What would be the timing to ask the questions, like before the making some prototype or after developing prototype?
As early as you can.
As early, even though it's idea.
Even though it's an idea. There's nothing worse than who's ever had to write an essay. Yeah, it's like, imagine doing your research, deciding you're going to write an essay before you've done any research. Yeah, and then you come back and read stuff and you go, oh my god, actually everything I've written is wrong. Yeah. So there's nothing. I mean, the more that it can feel like a real thing, but you don't have to build anything. So the other example is if you've got PowerPoint, is do screen mock-ups and say, look, I want to build something and it might look like this. Can you give me some feedback? What's that feedback? So I have a team in London today who's building a really, really cool product. And they built a product initially just to get it going, just a really basic product. But everything they're now designing, every single piece of new functionality, they're actually doing wireframes. They're just basically doing mock-ups of all of the screens. And then showing it to like 20 people.
Really?
And saying...
And every time?
Every time. Because it takes them about 3 days to mock up all of the screens. If they actually had to build it, it would probably take about 3 months. And then it would be wrong. They know that it would be wrong. So speak to as many smart people as you can. Try to ask them to tell you everything that works and what doesn't. But more particularly, what are the things which are broken about your business.
Okay, thank you. One thing is that maybe in Springboard in Techstars, you're gonna get a lot of like applications for the badge. So how do you measure the eligibility through the applications, reading applications, not doing in one-to-one interview or?
So we had over 1,000 applications. 1,000 for Techstars. And we select 10 teams from 1,000 in about 3 weeks.
How?
I got this big drum, yeah. I print out all the names and I hand them the drum. And it's like, oh, Fleeto! Yeah. We only pick lucky teams. No. So the way we have 5 criteria for deciding. So it's really important. Yeah, really important. First one is team. The second one is team. The third one is team. The fourth one is opportunity. And the fifth one is team. Just in case you missed it. When you start a business at such an early stage, there isn't anything else. There's your idea. And you're frigging around trying to turn the idea into something that people want. And so it's really important to concentrate on the team and working out whether the team can turn that into something. And actually, it doesn't even have to be the first idea. I mean, the examples they always give is the PayPal. PayPal wasn't PayPal when it first started. Yeah. Google actually makes its money from ads, not from search. So having a really smart bunch of people around you is exceptionally important. And if you're thinking about starting a business, you genuinely should go out and find the smartest people you can find to join your business. If they're as good as you, it's not good enough. Yeah, you should always be looking to fire yourself with the smartest people you can find. So yeah, we keep coming back to team, and that's probably the most important thing that we look at.
So you mean like a service itself doesn't matter too much?
So that's why I've got opportunity in the middle of it. Opportunity covers a whole mishmash of other things. The other thing, actually, I mean, I'm being a bit flippant. The other thing which is important to me is to work out how much have you done.
Experience?
No, as in, if you have an idea, coming to me and saying, I've got this great team, I've got this idea, I tend to go, yeah, that's sort of interesting, but you should really join the back of the queue, because I've got all of these other people who are already committed to what they're doing, and they're already doing it. So one way that I can look at how committed a team is to their idea is to see how much they've done. So how much they've done, whether they're doing this in the evening is really important, how they built anything is really important. Turning up with just ideas are cheap. Yeah. Ideas are really easy to have. Like, I'll fall down the stairs and have 5 ideas, probably saying I should get smaller shoes or bigger shoes or something. But committing yourself to the process and actually doing something, and actually when you do something, you learn a lot from it. Just sitting there and dreaming of all the ideas is kind of not really that interesting.
Can you see that the criteria through the applications? So can you identify about like among the like 1,000 applications?
So
like 3 million?
our applications are set up so that it says, talk to me about the people in your business.
Okay.
Talk to me about how the people know each other, i.e. the team, and then we have idea. And so it gets really easy for me. I mean, we have a one-liner at the very start of the application which sort of says, what are you doing?
So let's say, why did you choose the Flito?
I can't remember. I think we slipped through.
So what's the reason?
God, it's such a long time ago.
Yeah, it's been like 1 year and a half, maybe.
Because he was already building something, and what he had built, people seem to be using. So he had already put something out there, and something seems to be using. Now, what then happened was, once we get past the first interview section, the first process is we do a paper desktop review. And we kind of try to sort out, and we try to get it to about 50 people. And then I interview everybody, and a number of my investors interview people. And then we have a panel discussion at the end, and we have one final big interview. And one of the things which is apparent when we were interviewing Simon was, so all of the people who invest in my program are entrepreneurs. I'm really fortunate, really smart entrepreneurs who have made money and have decided to put some of that money back to help the next generation. And the thing that stood out was all of my investors just sat there and said, we like Simon, and we have no idea what the hell he's doing. We still don't know what the hell he's doing, but he's doing a lot of it. And they basically, it sounds stupid. No, that's really stupid. But entrepreneurs can smell other entrepreneurs.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, and it's not because they've got a bad deal. But there's something about when you put an entrepreneur in a room and you speak to somebody else, you kind of go, he's really smart, he's going to do something. And we just try to spend our life trying to find people who are like that, are going to do something really interesting.
Okay. Next question is, what do you make of all of these 1 billion valuation these days? Do you think are these companies worth it, or this is a sign of a bubble?
If you're looking at the world from Silicon Valley, actually it probably doesn't look like a bubble. There are very few businesses that are worth over $1 billion. and the ones that are worth over $1 billion, there's normally something there. The example that might be a better way of describing it is you might have 3 kids doing something really smart, and then they suddenly go out and they raise $1 million, and it's worth $10 million, and all they've done is just walk through the front door. Now, the thing that you have to remember about with those guys is the business valuations aren't worth anything until somebody pays for it. And so somebody's actually saying that is a really big opportunity, and we think it could be worth $1 billion, so we're going to start with a price point of, let's say, 10 million.
So, what kind of like companies or particular technologies that you are most fascinated right now, and what you are very interested about technology part?
Yeah. What am I interested in?
Well, recent very interesting some technology work.
So,
you see?
So the reason why I pull funny faces is because of the nature of the way we do our program. Is we're really dependent on the applications. Yeah. And because I said earlier we're just looking at team. Even when you see something and go, that's a really interesting technology, but I have no idea whether that person can deliver. It's the hard part. The thing that I've seen is mobile, and it's much used and it's much said, but the increasing number of things that you can do on a mobile is incredible.
For example?
So even I was talking about the Bank for Children. Yeah. Was they're never going to build anything else apart from on a mobile device. They are not going to build a website apart from for promotion purposes, because actually kids over the next 10 years will never want to look at anything else. And what it does is it simplifies the application really to the bare bones, and you actually really just get what you need, as opposed to kind of all the services that banks have created over the last kind of 50 years, and they don't want to drop any of them. So I think mobile, as I say, much as people keep talking about it, is I don't look at it as a mobile technology, but what I've seen is some really interesting things and going, oh, that's just a mobile platform, it's not anywhere else. The one that I like a lot, but unfortunately I'm in the wrong part of the world for it to be interesting, is they call it Internet of Things. So I tried to run Springboard IoT, Internet of Things, before Christmas, and it ran...
IoT is the Internet of Things.
IoT, yeah. It ran okay, but what I discovered was American investors, and particularly those in the Valley, have a lot more balls to invest in things much earlier in the cycle. And a lot of my teams actually that did Springboard IoT are now getting on planes and going to the Valley because they will potentially attract capital there. They won't attract capital in Europe. So that I find that really interesting. And that's just more... For those that are way too young to remember all of these things, in the beginning there used to be things called supercomputers. And then there were mainframes, and then there were workstations, and then there were personal computers, and then there were mobiles. So we're actually called the fifth, I think it's technically the 5th generation of computing. And every time you come down a generation, the number of people who use those platforms increases. The number of those increases. And the more it becomes democratized, if that makes sense, it spreads to a wider audience. Now, if you think about a mobile phone, there's typically a one-to-one relationship between you and your phone.
Yep.
The thing about IoT is, if you imagine potentially any device in your house connected to the internet, the number of devices which are going to be connected up and the potential value that you create from that is just enormous. I think it's one of those things, there's a lot of people getting excited about it today, but I'm going to get this wrong. In the short term, we overestimate what can be done in these technologies. Like, we should make an internet-connected toaster. not quite sure why, but maybe we should. But in the long term, we massively underestimate the capability of technology in this area when everything around you has potentially an IP address and connected in some form or fashion. And I suspect places like Korea, because of the infrastructure which exists, is actually better placed to potentially be a test bed for a lot of those technologies. And the population is much more readily engaged in technology and much less fearful of testing new and different technologies. It's like somebody said to me, NFC actually works here. You can use NFC. It's like anywhere else on the planet, people still kind of go, that's the thing in the back of the button that you press that nobody ever uses. Like UK, it doesn't exist. In Europe, it just doesn't exist. In the US, it doesn't exist. But it's clearly going to appear at some point. And that's an example of where South Korea has an opportunity to actually make it an advantage of, like, IoT, I think, is a big play that could potentially play out in the longer term here.
In some point is that we are a little bit getting tired of the downloading apps in mobile service. So except the in Korean like Kakao or Line, we don't use the other service a lot. So it can show that there is a limit of some development in the mobile service, except some very certain some applications or things. So
I think once you've had one game, like Rovio struggles with this, which is having Star Wars Angry Birds and having, I don't know, other versions of Angry Birds. I kind of understand, but when you're actually building completely new services, and it's not a plug, but you wouldn't ever imagine, I mean, Fleeto is a completely different service. Yeah? You wouldn't have imagined 2 years ago. Those are the things where I believe that the opportunity exists. When you're kind of making marginal changes on the edge to a product, I think it's like, we've got more filters than Instagram. It's like, well, yeah, okay, so what? But it only will take one game-changing app in any particular area. I mean, if you go back 18 months ago when you said there was a thing called Snapchat, yeah?
Yep.
You would have gone, that's completely mad. But it's now actually potentially bigger than Facebook.
Yeah.
So I think there will be apps which define the sector, and then there will be multiple clones or versions of it. But you're right. There will be a tolerance where it used to be we'll just look down lots of things. People are much more resistant. They'll download stuff and then delete it and try it.
What about the wearables service like a Google Glass or something that show the feature of the device?
So I'm not convinced by Google Glass in the short term. I think it's Brin and Sergey having fun because they can. I actually really believe in the watch.
A watch?
Watches. And I believe that there's a large South Korean electronics business that's probably going to launch one in 2 days' time.
What, Galaxy Watch?
I've heard that might be a rumor.
Yeah.
So the thing I've discovered is, anybody use Nike Fuel Bands or Fitbits or Jawbones? See, that's completely alien. In the US, there's just hundreds of these things. Yeah. But people have worn watches. I don't know how long you could go back, but they're actually a part of something that people are used to having. Yeah. And it's really, what I find is really interesting is they help to define, people wear watches to help define themselves. And some people will wear a really smart watch, and some people will wear a waterproof watch, and some people will have something really technical. And one of the things that I think is really interesting is, so I've got a Pebble, I don't actually have it on me, is it's a very natural extension of these things, of phones. And what I've discovered is, you can now. I've now switched off a lot of my notifications on my phone, and only the most important things buzz in my arm. So I just get notified on an as-needs basis, and I just think Apple will make an absolute pack out of this. So you're way too young. All of you guys are too young to remember this. During the early 2000s, Apple used to release iPods every year, and they used to be a different color or a different shape.
Yep.
They just did the same damn thing. Yeah. Oh, by the way, this one's got a little bit more memory than the last one, but it's a slightly different form function. That sounds to me like a watch. Yeah. Oh, and by the way, did you know that you can buy a watch for $1 or like $10,000? Where do you think on that scale Apple's going to appear? Yeah. So people actually have a very low tolerance, have a very, very high tolerance to paying different amounts for watches. So I can see Apple pricing a watch, and by the way, it'll be highly stylized, it'll be really well designed, set up, it'll be everything that Johnny Ives does really, really well, and it'll be twice as expensive as the Samsung. Samsung will have like 54 cameras and like 35 accelerometers, so that if you're skiing it'll do something, and if you're climbing it'll do something else. It'll be packed with as much technology as it can, and the Apple one will have like a screen, and it'll be twice as expensive. But I think, having used the Pebble Watch for the last 3 or 4 months, it feels very, very natural.
Have you used it?
Yeah. Use it a lot.
Really?
Yeah. But it just feels like something that I had before. Whereas, sorry, coming back to your point about glasses, glasses feels a little bit weird. I haven't tried them, but my suspicion is that a watch that just happens to notify you of a few other things apart from your time feels quite a natural way forward. Having glasses which have things in your eyes, I think, will be valuable to some people, but not to everybody. You will have a position where everybody could have a watch, but only a number will have glasses.
Okay.
Until Tom Cruise starts waving his arms in strange directions.
Okay. Let's move on to agendas that John picked. So, very interesting point. So, let's begin one by one. It's never too early to be an entrepreneur. What do you mean?
So, James asked me, like about 2 days ago,
Yeah.
so what was I meant to do? Create a list of what?
Sorry?
What was my list? I was meant to. These are the my
this is
topic
the one.
areas.
Yeah. Oh, everything. Yeah.
So I'm a really old fart. Yeah. It took me until I was almost 40 to decide that actually maybe I didn't want to work for somebody else. So I now spend my life trying to convince people that you don't have to be an old fart like me, and actually you can go out and start your own business. And the wonderful thing about, if there is a wonderful thing about the down cycle in the current market, particularly in Europe, is you can't get a job anywhere else. So it's actually creating a really interesting dynamic in Europe, which is actually forcing people who are graduates, who are really smart, to actually just go and start their own business. So actually, the banks might have done us a favour to actually support entrepreneurism in the longer term. So yeah, my answer is you don't have to be an old fart like me to go and learn how to be an entrepreneur.
Okay. The next one is
Go on, say it.
what's the shy bears get not?
Note.
Yeah.
Shy burns get out.
Yeah.
Anybody know what that means?
You don't ask, you don't get.
Absolutely. The one thing that entrepreneurs are really good at is don't be scared about asking. The worst thing in the world they can say is no. Nobody's going to die. It's not going to cause a second world war or another world war. Well, in this part of the world, that might not necessarily be the right answer. It depends who you ask the question.
But it can be a little bit like look rude or not prepared if somebody keep asking or.
No, it's just, look, you just ask and you ask once.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, the number of times I speak to people and they go, if I had, and you kind of go, well, just ask. The worst thing they can say is no, and actually you'd be surprised how often they'll say yes. Or, here's a different thing, completely different idea. I have a very good friend of mine, he's a very successful entrepreneur, who somebody said to him at one point, you know, there's 100 to 1 chance that you'll raise money from an angel. And so he decided that every day for the next 100 days, he would go and find an investor and ask an investor, would he invest in his business? And every day he went along and they said no, and no, and no.
No.
But what he actually was thinking in the back of his head is, I need to get to 100 investors, because if I get to 100, one of them's going to say yes. Yeah. So every time I get a no, I'm one step closer to a yes.
Wow. Very
Yeah.
good.
But you have to ask. If you don't ask, the telepathy, as far as I'm aware, doesn't work. Yeah. It's like, did you hear me, James? No, that doesn't work. So I think it's just, don't be shy, just ask. Go on.
Yeah.
You don't think asking too early may just waste your better chance later, like using people's passions
What are you asking for money?
for anything?
No. I mean, as long as it's done in as long as you do it in a fashion which means that you're not going to piss them off. Yeah. And sometimes I'll say that. I'll say, I might be asking too early, but could you? And they might come back and say, no, it's too early, I won't. But start a dialogue. It's better to start a dialogue. I think that's the other thing that I discovered was, I don't think it's on the list. No, it's not on the list. The thing that's really frightening for investors is go to an investor and say, I don't want your money. I want your advice. Yeah, that really throws them, because especially in parts of the world where there isn't a lot of capital. And so what I've said to a lot of my teams is go and speak to investors even before you need money, and start to talk to them and say, look, I don't need your money. I'm way too early for that, which A, shows a level of maturity, but B, ask them for feedback and say, this is what I'm trying to do. Coming back to the ask 3 people and those 3 people ask another 3 people. Just try and get feedback. And what that does is it starts a relationship with that investor, which means that and what you do is you finish the statement with, okay, that was really valuable. Can I come back to you in 3 or 4 months' time and give you some feedback about what I've done? So you've already started this engagement. When you go and speak to an investor, and typically you say, can I have money? Typically, more often than not, of the 100 people, it'll be a no. That's really difficult to come back from. It's really difficult to say, well, can I come back and ask you for some more money in 90 days' time? It's like, you really trying to piss me off? So try to create dialogues with people earlier, and go and meet investors even before you need to raise investment, just so you get on the radar. I think that's a really valuable thing.
Okay, and next one is talk is cheap and ideas are worthless.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Your idea stinks, Simon. It's really easy to say this in retrospect, and it's really hard in somewhere like America to understand this because it's so ingrained within the culture. But I spent a lot of my life around Eastern Europe, and there's still a culture of, I can't tell you that because it's really valuable. I think I'll touch on it later on. But at the end of the day, it's your idea. And it's amazing how your idea is based upon like how passionate you are about your idea. That the idea of passing one idea to another person is really difficult. And for somebody to go, I'm going to tell you a really cool idea. I'm going to tell you a really cool idea about a business that I'm actually, one of my teams is doing in the UK. And you could have, like, anybody go, no you don't, I was going to say small children. My 7-year-old could code this app, yeah? So essentially what it is, imagine we live in a world where everything's now moving towards going from offline retail online. And so therefore we become much more reliant on couriers sending packages, yeah? So imagine I'm Ralph Lauren, how much I spend on my website and how much I spend on my brand and the packaging and how my clothes are made, and then I give it to this bloody courier. Might not be the same here, but in the UK is like it gets slung into the back of a lorry and then it gets delivered to wherever it needs to get delivered, and then they throw it over the fence. And you kind of go, oh my God, do you know how much money we've spent on actually doing that? And what they've done is they've put a little QR code, this is really dull, on the side of a package, which allows you to give feedback. And it's a highlight style, it's really stylized. And so 12% of people who get courier packages actually click on the QR code and give feedback about it. And so therefore the retailer can get a really good assessment about how good the couriers are. Now, that's not really that difficult to replicate, is it? Yeah. How many people in the room feel a real desire to go and build that product today? Yeah. It's a really easy idea to understand. It's not that complicated. It's easy to replicate. So why wouldn't you go and do it? Because especially with early ideas, is it's something that comes from within. It's something that you want to fix. So I describe it's like the first album. Yeah. Bands who do the first album is born out of angst. It's born out of teenage rage in their bedrooms. Yeah. And it's only something that's really personal to you. When you get into second or third albums, it becomes a bit more like a job. And that's what I describe, which is serial entrepreneurs. Serial entrepreneurs are much more willing to go and do, that's really opportunistic. That I could make money out of that. But the very first idea and the very first entrepreneurs tend to be built on your own personal ideas and passions, not something you pick up from somebody else.
Okay, yeah, it makes sense. And next one is, think you are probably going to fail.
Yeah, so somebody much smarter than me came up with this. And it basically was the idea the chances of you actually having a business that is really successful is slim. Yeah? So you might as well start with something which is really big. Yeah? So if you shoot for the moon and you fall short, you'll probably still do really well.
Yeah.
If you start with a really small idea and you fail, it's going to be a complete waste of time. So it's the idea of that try to be big and ambitious and gutsy.
Okay.
And if you fall short, even of the really big gutsy idea, you'll still have a really interesting and big business.
And I think I like this one. When you have no money, you can ask for the most. Yeah.
So the one thing I've discovered is if you've raised a seed round, the expectation is you have to pay for everything. So you'll suddenly go and ask for some advice from PR people, and PR people go, yeah, and you'll pay me. Yeah. So that's the downside of raising money. Everybody expects to get paid somehow, somewhere along the way. When you've got no money, you can get away with hell. Yeah. You can actually ask for a lot of favours. It's kind of coming back to the Shyburns getting out. You have a greater opportunity to leverage into people's relationships and get people to do things they wouldn't ordinarily do. And because you're doing it and you have no money, people are much more sympathetic and much more willing to help you at that really early stage with actually free services and support. You can get away with a lot more when you have nothing than if you've got $5 million in the bank. It's like, sorry, how does that work? Unless they think they're going to get money out of it at some point in the future.
So you mean that you emphasize on the mindset to have a behavior or have a mindset thinking like that you have no money, or?
No, it's actually a point when you practically have no money.
Okay.
It goes back to the Shyburns getting out, which is you shouldn't be scared about asking people to help you.
Okay. And next one is don't praise me, tell me where I'm going to, F up. Yeah. So what's this means?
So that was the bit I just said earlier, which was like it's very easy to go into a room and actually pitch your idea, and people go, "That's great, and that's great, and that's great." Actually, if you spend half an hour speaking to somebody and they spend 20 minutes telling you the awesome things, it doesn't actually add a lot of value to you. So I tend to be of the belief, which is more important to get feedback and say, so where am I going to trip up? What are the things which are going to break? And this was something that Reid Hoffman, who did LinkedIn, is well known for. When he initially set up LinkedIn, the thing he did was he ran around and spoke to lots of smart people, and he basically said, tell me what's going to break. Tell me all the things that are not going to work, because the sooner I can figure out how I fix those, the more valuable it's going to be for everybody.
Yeah. And and opinions are just data.
Yeah.
Very important part.
So this might be particularly related to my day job in Techstars. Is one of the things which you have the opportunity to do is you get to speak to lots of smart people. One of the things which stands out is people get really, really worried about, oh, that was James's opinion, or that was Simon's opinion, or that was John's opinion. So actually when you speak to about, I think I've discovered, if you get to about 25 people, 25 to 30 people, covers off most bases. You'll get most of the feedback that you need to get feedback. It's just all data, yeah? It's just an opinion given by somebody else, and you need to depersonalize it. And what I say to people is, it's important to look at that data at the broadest level. So one of the things that young entrepreneurs struggle with is, what should I do first? When you've spoken to 25 people and you've had their opinions, you'll suddenly get a lot of data which basically will help say, you need to be going off doing this, or you need to be doing that, yeah? So use the data points as a way to try and set the priorities of what you should be doing in the business.
Okay. Yeah, next one is no one cares about your business, only you.
Yeah, so this is another thing about accelerator programs as well, which is you sit down and you talk to lots of smart people and you ask for their opinion. And sometimes they're nasty, and sometimes they're less nasty, and sometimes they're quite nice. But those people probably didn't hear about your business up until 20 minutes earlier. And sometimes it feels really rough at the end of speaking to somebody when they've kind of told you everything that's broken about your business. But actually, you know what? 10 minutes after he's finished that meeting, the chances are those people will not care about your business. And so it's really important to remember that the only person that wakes up and thinks about your business in the morning is you. And the only people that think about your business when you go to bed at night is you. And you have more information about your business than anybody else. Think of those third parties, those opinions, as just data points. They're really valuable data points. But at the end of the day, the business is yours, and it's your responsibility, and you're the only ones that truly care about your business. Everybody else will help and support, but it's important that you take ownership and you take away from that actually it's you that matters at the end of the day, in the middle of all of this.
Yeah, very good. And the last one is make it personal.
I think that's the same thing. Make it personal. Yeah, I think this comes back to, I just said it again, which is, at the end of the day, businesses, particularly at early stage in web technologies, are very, very, it's so dependent on individuals. And you help to define what the business is. And this is a whole kind of shift away from everything which has been business over the last 20 years. And I see this a lot. I think this is, I can't quite describe it, it's really difficult to describe, but I see this long-term trend towards, particularly in Europe, of people who used to go to large corporates, who were particularly smart people. And 15 years ago, they all jumped ship because it was all cool and trendy, and a lot of them ran back. And I'm talking about people who used to work for Boston or for McKinsey and people like this. But I'm seeing a long-term pattern where smart people are actually deciding to opt out and run their own businesses. And that might not necessarily be in the sense of being venture funded. That might be just actually, I just want to work for myself. And a lot of that is because they want to define the way they want to work. And they want to define the culture that they want to work in. And this becomes really, really personal. And you can extend this into organizations like Zappos in the States, where they have very, very strong cultures. But they get defined by the founder at the very beginning. And I see this every time I run a program, which is the founders suddenly wake up one day and realize that they are the people that set the rules. And it's not anybody else. And if they want to give away free food, they can do that. And if they want to give away free beer, they can do that. or if they want to basically have fitness people coming in on a Tuesday morning to get everybody jumping up and down, they can do whatever they want. They can set the way, like with Zappos, like what customer service really is. They didn't have to ask permission from anybody else in the process. So startups genuinely are personal. I have to tell this really sad story, Simon. You close your ears. I don't know whether this is actually true, but this is urban fiction now. So Simon, when he was in the program, there was a point during which that they were putting on hundreds of thousands of users every week, and Simon sat there. Simon can't code, bloody idiot. But he's got lots of really smart developers that sit around him. And he literally, there's four of them, there's four on the desk. And he's sitting there going, I can't do anything. Code faster. It's like the servers were falling over. He spent, what, $2 a year on new servers or something? He had to eventually stop that. But what he discovered was he couldn't do anything about his business. He was completely reliant on the people around him. So what he used to do was he used to go and get them food. They weren't allowed to leave the tables. It's like, so what do you want for lunch? Okay, yeah, go and get your lunch. But I genuinely don't know if this is true, but this is the story I tell, is he used to let the guys sleep in the mornings. He used to make them breakfast so that they could get another half an hour's sleep. And that actually helped, to me, with Fleeto, define the culture of what it meant. It was a very flat structure, and it was like, we will do what is necessary to run this business, and I don't care whether my name's CEO or founder. I will get in I'll get into the dugouts with you as well. It's just, those are the sorts of things which at a really early stage you don't really appreciate at the time, but it really truly helps you define what your business could be and should be.
Thank you for your time for almost 2 hours.
No, thank you for listening.
Thank you so much.
Apart from Ben.
Thank you so much. So appreciate for your time and visiting in South Korea.
So one of the things you guys have to remember is genuinely coming back to my initials, one of the points I was making there, which is you are right in the foothills of something really, really interesting. And it might not feel like it at the minute, but this is only going one way, and it's going to get bigger, and it's going to become more interesting, and people are going to become much more connected, and you have an ability to influence what that looks like. And it's important that you own what you want this ecosystem to look like. And I tend to use the words, pardon my French, you don't have to have this on camera, which is try and keep it an arsehole-free zone, yeah? Because actually it's really easy. There will be egos which get into this and will be dickheads and arseholes. But what you need to do is create an environment which actually allows people to thrive and to be themselves. And I've seen this in various different locations. And the fact that you're out and you're still listening to me at whatever time of the evening is actually really impressive. And it shows that you genuinely do care about this stuff. So you should really congratulate yourself on this stuff. Cheers.
Thank you so much. Thank you.